2. This is brought to you by Zayuk. Zayuk is a smart property system that provides property owners as well as property managers the ability to manage their infrastructure more effectively. And we use construction-based mechanisms, construction-based modules with financial-based modules, with governance-based modules. So one of our top client bases are homeowners associations, but infrastructure and these new technologies, financial technologies, as well as AI, frankly, are so powerful and so novel and going to continue on forever. So, I mean, that was not true, but are going to bring a lot of change and optimizations to businesses and especially property owners and managers to better enhance their ability to manage their systems. And today we are going to be chatting about a fire that displaced 100 people in UC Riverside. Displaces 100 people, more than 100 people after a large fire. Firefighters arrived, flames shooting through the roof at 3996 Iowa Avenue. Chief Greg White, Riverside Fire Division. Fire was reported at 11:13 a.m. at the University Riverside Gardens, just a few blocks from UC Riverside. Not student housing, but university officials say they were working to determine how many, if any, UCR students may have been affected. Not owned or operated, the university is working to determine, again, how many were. About 50 of the 112 units in the building were affected by the flames. White said officials estimate that about 115 people have been displaced. It's unclear what sparked the flames. Very unfortunate. You have no idea what sparked the flames. So there's likely not much more on that. We'll keep an eye on that in case. I don't think anything else will come from that. Soon they're going to have to do an investigation, and based off of, they have to do an investigation. Hopefully there's no injuries or fatalities. That's a very difficult thing to happen. So you don't know what to say. Let's move on. So here's something. Castle Rock may ban HOA fines for brown lawns during drought. This is Colorado, working to bar homeowners associations and metro districts from fining residents for brown or dormant grass during drought conditions. Passed the first reading of Ordinance 2026 TAC 018 on May 19th. The same night, the city issued a Stage 1 advisory drought declaration. Ordinance is being voted on as city officials and state regulators say they have not received any complaints about HOA actually enforcing green lawn. Second and final reading is scheduled for June 2nd. If approved, the ordinance would take effect immediately, said the Director of Castle Rock Water said the ordinance is a proactive measure promoted by years of residents raising concerns on social media and at water conservation classes. That's an interesting, Colorado is an interesting use case for that because you'd think Colorado green, well, they're in a drought. So here in Southern California, there's this desert sort of aesthetic that is highly water friendly. It's very water friendly. And so I'm wondering what type of aesthetic, probably for them more less green, specifically less green, probably even less grass completely, and more just kind of dirt. The ordinance would apply only during officially declared drought stages, regardless of the level of restriction, and would prohibit HOAs and metro districts from penalizing residents for brown or dormant grass, imposing minimum watering requirements, or enforcing landscaping standards that conflict with the city drought restrictions. Castle Rock Water sent notice to all HOAs in the city earlier this month, and this goes to show you the level of governance. So federal government, first you have your HOA, then your local ordinances, then your state ordinances, then your the federal government. And so we just saw an HOA in St. Port Lucie, Florida, attempt to ban guns in common areas, and immediately the attorney general of the state got involved and said this will, the local police said this won't be enforced, and the attorney general sent a letter that I believe needs to be responded to. So it's important for homeowner associates because that's a lot of operational costs through that. And it's not like you guys are homeowners associations are big organizations that have a bunch of money, and even well-run organizations don't have money to spend like that because they're well-run. So understanding the ordinances which you actually can implement and what you can't implement, because it can come back to bite you. So residents can come back and sue the association. It happens. So it's important when you're doing these things to get some sort of HOA lawyer or someone who's an expert in making sure that at least your ordinances that you're declaring are legal and binding, and you're not going to put yourself in a bad position, which very often requires an attorney. I know some managers are able to, and some management companies provide their own way of, for example, within the state that they work in, they know specific ordinances that they can implement without needing an attorney, which you still need to go to an expert. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not recommending that. And so go to an attorney. Castle Rock Water Commission voted 7-0 in favor of recommending the ordinance before it went to council. Dolany said Colorado's Common Interest Ownership Act, known as CCIOA, does offer some protection for homeowners. A member of the commission also noted at the May 19th meeting that many HOAs in the area are managed by companies based outside Castle Rock that may not be aware that a drought declaration has been issued, asking residents to voluntarily reduce by 10% under the Stage 1 advisory. Wow. Okay. The Solana on the River condos, a fight could be brewing over cutting oak trees because of foundation concerns. One resident is not happy about it, heard what could happen. He reached out to the community correspondent and showed him 15 trees that are now marked with caution tape. HOA is considering cutting down trees because Their thick roots might be getting in the way of the water line. Worries about losing all the shade on the street. It's going to be hotter than Hades out here if all these trees come down. Board member who used to be on the city council told James the board will have a meeting about the trees next month. Some trees are negatively affecting the water pipes. They're a tree city and support trees, but these particular trees are terrible because they have long roots. The city cares and manages trees, so the Arbor Day Foundation recognizes Cape Canaveral as a tree city. Maybe 1 or 2 trees at most should be cut down if they're affecting the sidewalks. He said if other communities around the country can manage living with large oaks, his neighborhood should too. Wow. People get very upset with trees, and you need to know the laws. Many states have laws about overhanging trees. So if a tree from an your neighbor or somewhere you don't have access to, that's not your land, has a branch or anything hanging over your property, many states we've already researched this, permit you to cut what's over your property. You cannot cut at the tree. But people get very upset with trees. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. Here we go. Inwood Forest Village petition sparks renewed calls for Texas HOA laws. Texas relative to Florida, New York. New York is kind of its own beast. Florida and California has much less HOA laws. Florida and California are the two probably have the largest HOA requirements. An ongoing battle against a Houston homeowner association involving allegations of stolen funds, questionable foreclosures, and years of scandal has ignited a new push for state laws protecting property owners. This might be similar to what we've seen in Tennessee. Neighbors in the Inwood Forest Village subdivision are questioning where their HOA money is going and whether the organization is even legitimate. They started a petition to remove the entire HOA board, collecting signatures outside the gate of the closed community pool in early May. And before we continue, this goes to the point that people want, need, and demand access. Okay. And that is going to give you, as a board member, much more ability to deflect allegations of negligence. Because in 2026, HOAs are in such a tight position that you could do many things right and still face allegations of fraud, embezzlement, negligence, corruption without really any evidence, just because it's very easy. And so I'm not saying this is any way, but people need the access to the information, and it's in your best interest to provide the access to that information, because if you don't, people will make these wild allegations. Then we can vote them out and reestablish our legal HOA board members. The HOA was dissolved and they found out the president was stealing money and he moved out of the neighborhood. Then they reestablished it by themselves. They never voted the board in. It takes a 2/3 majority of the homeowners to select a board. They changed the bylaws, and so the laws have to be changed. Keeping up with property management changes is also a challenge. The pool, they're saying, costs over $100,000 to fix. They've collected over $1 million. Who can we go to complain? The battle playing out in this Houston neighborhood mirrors many across Texas, where the Community Associations Institute reports 6.25 million Texans live in one of the 23,000 community associations in the state. The Attorney General's office says it received more than 3,300 HOA-related complaints just last year. I'll be looking at drafting more legislation to protect homeowners while maintaining the strength of a civic club or HOA, said Representative Charlene Ward Johnson. She says the legislation she'll propose next session will require more transparency, address excessive attorney fees that drive up foreclosures, and require HOAs to prove homeowners are properly notified about meetings. We do need management companies, but I also want to protect homeowners who take in their hard-earned money to invest in the neighborhood to make sure their home ownership is protected. I don't think you'll get rid of managers. What I think you'll have is a very high deleveraging of the financials to a point where the management companies are going to have to change their model and just be like, we need this, whatever it was, we need the money up front. We're going to charge a premium. You don't have access to anyone else who can do this type of work. And this is how much it costs. And maybe some property managers won't do it, or maybe people will use technology, but we'll see what happens. So yes, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer put an HOA in his crosshairs after the organization implemented a new rule that he says violated residents' rights. Tradition Community Association in Port St. Lucie unanimously resolved that no person shall carry or possess any firearm or other weapon, whether opened or concealed, on any common area owned or maintained by the association. And that is kind of very obviously a that goes very closely against the Constitution. So again, these things can come back to bite you, because if the association actually implements that law, very high probability the association is going to be sued. And so you put yourself in a crosshair. You put yourself at risk when you start creating laws that limit other people. And it's important to understand your local municipalities' laws, your state laws, but even in this case, the federal law. Federal law, Second Amendment, right to bear arms. And I'm not an attorney, and none of this is legal advice, but that one's kind of, seems a little easy. That's kind of a toss up. Gimme there. You can't ban guns. arms, Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. So, and then you have such a strong retaliation from the state attorney general. That's huge. That doesn't happen very often. I've been covering HOA news for like 6, 8 months, and I've absolutely never seen something like that, where the attorney general of the state has to actually send a letter to a single association like that. It's pretty wild. And if I was that HOA and that, I mean, that's kind of distressing too. As the board member, you have the Florida Attorney General actually contacting your association again. That's not normal. That's not normal. So it's actually, you're also curious, did they get any legal advice before implementing that? Because um, it seems like they may not have gotten some legal advice. But it's important to consult an attorney in your local municipality, because you do run a risk. You do run a risk. Okay, we're going to transition from HOAs to utilities. So we're going to transition from HOAs to utilities now. As many as 30 data centers under discussion in Kentucky. Lack of regulations, cheap energy costs make the state a primary target for new industry. Communities are grappling with the prospect of hyperscale data center projects, massive sprawling warehouses of power-intensive computer clusters potentially moving in. Louisville Gas and Electric and Kentucky Utilities, the state's largest utility, told the Kentucky Public Service Commission in March that 11 data centers with a combined electricity demand of almost 3.5 gigawatts of power have at least a 50% chance or greater of setting up shop in the state. The amount of electricity demand could power more than 2 million homes. LG&E and KU said it had the 29 potential data centers in its pipeline in total. Total prospective electricity demand from potential data centers could be around 12 gigawatts of electricity, generated a maximum of 18.4 gigawatts in the summer of 2024. That's KU. Other electrical utilities in the state are also trying to usher in power-intensive data centers in the state, with one company seeking to launch 2 enormous data center operations, one at the site of former Western Kentucky aluminum mill and one at an Eastern Kentucky industrial park. The number of sprawling data centers that could move into Kentucky would still be dwarfed by data center hotspots such as Virginia. Virginia is the data center hotspot. It is the data center hotspot. I believe they are very, very data center friendly, which has to do with the distance from the federal government's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Kentuckians and communities near what these data centers want to locate have strong concerns. Potential enormous electricity usage and whether it could exacerbate electricity bills. The source of water and the amount needed to cool data centers, whether property values will go down for homeowners living near a data center. I will say this. I do not believe, I think it will be quite the opposite. That's my belief. I have no insight, like true. This is just, if you live near a data center, I do think that your value will go up if you have a data center near you. I believe that. And so that is one thing to consider. People are questioning whether their property values will go down. I don't believe that. I do not think that will occur. Maybe it will. Maybe it will draw so much energy that the energy that you have to pay is so high that possibly it lowers the value, or there's something going on. It there's questions about pollution. The reality is, I think there are many other things that pollute the environment a lot more. like golf courses and some other things. But I don't believe that people's houses or property values will go down if they're in proximity to a data center. I don't believe that. Doesn't seem logical to me. A GOP-backed bill would require data centers to cover their own electricity and water infrastructure costs. Failed. Some Kentucky utilities argue their rules and rates already protect other ratepayers from the impact of data centers. Kentucky and other states have been home to smaller data centers that power various online services, including digital cloud storage. A lot of that is what it's been. I mean, there's also compute, storage. Now we're going into the age of compute where most of it's going to be compute. But with the advent of services powered by artificial intelligence, much more massive data centers coined as hyperscale that can use the electricity equivalent of entire power plants that have been expanding across the country. I do see, I just think it's going to be more modular. You're going to see a lot of these hyperscalers, about 50% of them haven't gone through. They don't seem very logical. I think one reason people and massive corporations like them is because you can just create one and then boom, you have processing power immediately. Whereas if you consider a more modular approach, you actually are going to have to pay certain individual providers who will be hyperscaling for you. In sort of like a Bitcoin distributed compute form, which I think will be, I mean, you just look at how Bitcoin went, and it's pretty obvious that that platform just through distributed compute is more powerful and more sustainably powerful than one where all the compute is monolithic. It's just, it seems pretty obvious, especially when you think about just physical constraints of electrical utilities. It seems, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It seems like that. I thought about this a year ago, and you see companies with NVIDIA about to give, hand out, about to create modular data centers. And so we here at Zayuk are looking at that. We don't have the ability to implement that in our suite just yet, but it's certainly happening soon. LG&E and KU is planning to spend billions of dollars to build 2 gas-powered plants. The spokesowner for LG&E and KU did not provide an update of data center projects in the utility's economic development pipeline. LG&E and KU respectfully disagreed with criticism that their economic development process lacked clarity or that data center prospects were speculative. Industrial park and idled mill. One company in particularly is making waves in Kentucky, announcing its plan to take over an industrial park earlier this month, TerraWolf. Greenup County Industrial Park, the same site where state and local officials tried and failed to get a proposed aluminum mill to locate. Other communities, including in Mercer and Mason counties, are also grappling with potential interest from data center developers. I think there's going to be, I know people hate data centers. I believe that the economic value of data centers in communities is going to be a little obvious in 5 years, and it's going to be like reversed, where communities are actually asking for data centers to come in. That's what I see happening, to be honest. All right, thank you, everyone. Take